Hello everyone, welcome to Mind the Gap. This is a seminar series created by the Randwick Health and Innovation Precinct team about moving from ideas to solutions for healthcare. My name is Stephen Palmer. I'm the Industry and Innovation Lead for the Randwick Health and Innovation Precinct, and I'd very much like to acknowledge the other institutions involved in organising today's event, represented by some of my colleagues who you'll meet shortly. From the Tyree Foundation Institute of Health Engineering, the George Institute of Global Health, UNSW Sydney and UNSW founders. And I thank the Sydney Children's Hospital for allowing us to use their facilities today. And a big thank you to Sam Carmont at the back for helping with the AV tech. Thanks, Sam. On the next slide, before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge that the Randwick Health and Innovation Precinct partners acknowledge the traditional custodians on whose land the precinct stands, and pay our respect to the Bidjigal and Gadigal peoples who traditionally occupied the eastern suburbs coast. A bit of housekeeping. In the room, if you have questions during the panel session, can you please raise your hand if you're in the room, and we'll bring you a microphone, which is the preferred, or you can use Slido if you like. If you're online, you will have to use Slido, so please log in now using the QR code or the number. Just put your camera against the QR code, you'll see it take you to the correct place. And also note that this session is being recorded and will be posted to our HIP's YouTube channel. So today is entitled Lifting Health Technology Innovation Out of the Too Hard Basket, and we've assembled a stellar group of people who've very kindly contributed their time today. We have Josh Ismin he's the CEO and co-founder of Psylo, who'll be giving a presentation. We have Tim Scott, who's a paediatric rehabilitation physician here at the Sydney Children's Hospital. We have Parissa Glass, who's the Director of Innovation and Enterprise at the George Institute. We have Ian Goon, who's the Head of Strategy and Innovation at iHealthE. We have Dina Tikova, who's the Senior Manager for MedTech at UNSW Founders. And we have Phoebe Phillips, who's the Associate Dean Partnerships and Engagement for the Faculty of Medicine and Health. We have Eric Way, who's the Senior Business Development Manager for Life Sciences at UNSW Knowledge Exchange, and you've got me as well. So great cast of people who are all within this precinct and are all involved in innovation in some part. So I just have a couple of slides to introduce and kick things off. This is a picture of a snapshot of our HIP's innovation ecosystem, and in the black text is the commonly available resources. In red are differentiating features for our HIP. So I think we're very well resourced to be a thriving centre for initiating new health technology developments. But there is a bottleneck. If we want to play a more active part in the worldwide effort to improve the lives of patients by improving health technology, if Australia is serious about the National Reconstruction Fund, with medical science being one of the 7 priority areas, then we need you as an active participant in this ecosystem. And we need a cultural shift in our public health and tertiary education systems that incentivizes, encourages and rewards employees for active participation. The truth is there's simply not enough people involved in health technology innovation and not enough ideas going into the top of the funnel. The mill just needs more grist. So I'm hoping today, and one of my roles is to encourage you, if you're not already involved, to take a more active role in this process. So my question to you is this something you'd like to participate in? And if so, what role would you want to play in health technology innovation? Are you a patient needs expert? Are you an inventor? Or are you an innovator? And just to pick apart what I mean by the difference between those two terms. So just using the example of penicillin. Penicillin is arguably the most important health technology development of the 20th century. And we all know that Alexander Fleming, the guy in the white coat, identified a secretion from Penicillium mold that killed a range of pathogenic bacteria. But the truth is, he published that paper in 1929 to almost universal indifference. And it wasn't until Howard Florey assembled a team of expert chemists, clinicians, trialists to extract the active ingredient and turn it into a safe, stable, effective medication in 1940 that really changed the world. So inventing can be a sole pursuit, but innovation is always a team sport. And if you have no interest in either of those things, but you can identify unmet clinical needs and know what will actually work in clinical practice, that is a huge part of invention and innovation. And we need you to be part of those teams. After all, the hardest step in any journey is the first one. If you do see yourself as an innovator or an inventor, then there are two main routes to technology implementation. There's licensing the technology to an existing company, which means lower risk but lower control, and leaves you to do what you're doing now and then there's creating a startup, which has higher control but also higher risk and more of a boardroom type role. So today I'm hoping to inspire you to get involved in health technology innovation by listening to an exciting story about a startup that's unfolding within this precinct. The company Psylo are co-located in the School of Chemistry at UNSW and are engaged in developing new treatments for mental health. And I'd like to invite Josh's Psylo CEO to come to the stage to tell us that story, Josh. A round of applause, please. And just one more opportunity to log on to Slido if you've missed.
Thank you, Steve. Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming. So I am Josh Ismin. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Psylo. We're a drug discovery startup based at the School of Chemistry, as Steve mentioned, developing psychedelic-inspired medications to treat mental illness. I've got a quick presentation to go through a bit about our space and the reason for starting a company in this space, a bit about what we're focusing on specifically, and then also a bit about how we started and sort of the entrepreneurial journey part of that. The unmet need in this space is tremendous. So Psylo was started to meet an unmet need in mental illness. So over the last decade, our mental health trajectory has been on a very rapid decline, which was exacerbated by COVID. As you can see on this slide, 44% of Australians experience a mental illness at some point in their lifetimes. And the primary pharmacological tool we use to grapple with this crisis are antidepressants, particularly SSRI antidepressants, which prescriptions of which have continued to soar over the last decade. So prescription rates have doubled in the last decade for antidepressants. And they work for some, but they come with a very challenging side effect profile. And critically, they haven't really been materially improved upon in approximately 36 years since they were first released. And so, this really begs the question, over that 36-year period, we've gained a much better understanding of how the brain works, but we haven't really developed new drugs to treat it. And the story there is basically that of divestment. So the large pharmaceutical companies that you see on the slide here have largely moved away from investing in neuroscience drug development programs on the back of failed investment in Alzheimer's and dementia medications. So the solution is not coming in the near term from big pharma in this case, unfortunately. So the primary way that antidepressants work is by making more serotonin available in the brain. Serotonin is a neurotransmitter that's integral for regulating mood, memory, and learning. Turns out there are other compounds that look a lot like serotonin, which have been used by indigenous populations for thousands of years as medicines. So this is psilocin, which is the active metabolite of psilocybin from magic mushrooms. And as you can see, it looks nearly identical to serotonin, and it actually engages with many of the same receptors in the brain and the body, known as the serotonergic system. And I'll get to that in a little bit. But psychedelics like psilocybin are currently being investigated in a number of clinical trials around the world, well over 100, mostly for neuropsychiatric indications such as anxiety, depression, PTSD, etc. And the primary way that these clinical trials are happening is psychedelic-assisted therapy. Psychedelic-assisted therapy is where a patient is going into a clinic and they're being administered a psychedelic drug. Generally they're in a bed, There's 1 to 2 clinicians overseeing them for a full 6 to 8 hour psychedelic trip. Eye shades on, headphones in. It's generally a very sort of internal experience, and it lasts the full day. So this is a really promising solution that is showing a lot of great results in clinical studies so far. RTGA, you may have seen recently, downscheduled psilocybin and MDMA for certain indications, which will lead to another option for many people who currently have tried everything and nothing works. The main question we asked at Psylo in starting the company is, if nearly half of people struggle with mental illness at some point in their lifetimes, are we expecting them all to undergo psychedelic-assisted therapy? And the reality is that a number of people, the majority of people, will be unwilling or unable to go through psychedelic-assisted therapy in this fashion. There's currently a 6 to 12 month wait to see a psychiatrist, full stop. So the resource-intensive nature of psychedelic-assisted therapy is going to be a clear hurdle for making it scalable, but also just a number of people are going to be contraindicated from going through this type of experience, or they're going to be just unwilling to do it because it is quite an intense experience. So Psylo is set up to develop alternatives. Our mission is to extend the healing potential of psychedelics to a broader patient population, and we're doing that by building a therapeutics platform to treat brain disorders which are inspired by psychedelic compounds from nature. So I mentioned the serotonergic system before. The primary serotonin receptor that psychedelics engage with is shown here. This is 5-HT2A, or the 2A serotonin receptor. So since this receptor was discovered, it's been a drug development liability for drug developers because the dogma is that engagement with this receptor, you're developing something that could have psychedelic effects, right? Now there's all this promise in psychedelic drugs, and so Psylo is specifically engaging with this receptor to develop new drugs which have tempered effects from the classic psychedelics. So we're developing 3 different families of drugs. And I'll go through these in a bit of detail. So the first one are shorter acting psychedelics. So this would be used as an adjunct to therapy in the same way as psychedelic assisted therapy, but with a shorter duration. So we can potentially dose more patients. So instead of 2 clinicians spending a full day with one patient, you could potentially dose 2 to 3 people in one day. The second product family are longer acting subperceptual psychedelics. So basically, there's a lot of promise with microdosing you may have heard of. It has a lot of anecdotal support currently, but the clinical trials really haven't played out to 100% prove the efficacy there. So our lead compounds for this product family are to be used for a microdosing application, but they've removed the cardiac liability that's inherent in the classic psychedelics like psilocybin, and therefore they can be used more suitably as a chronically dosed or repeat dosed type drug. And the third is really the moonshot for our company. These are non-hallucinogenic compounds which could be used as a take-home medication and really scales the patient population to a much larger degree. And there is increasing evidence that non-hallucinogenic psychedelics are possible. The sort of downstream biological effects have been proven to the rodent level, and there are other companies in our space that are about to start clinical trials with non-hallucinogenic compounds, but this is an area that's as I mentioned, that's the moonshot. So we think of these 3 product families on a sort of sliding scale of clinical validity, where shorter acting psychedelics has effectively been proven in later stage clinical trials that mode of administration works. Longer acting psychedelics, like I said, anecdotal support, initial results are really promising, but the jury's still out. And then the third is the moonshot play. So a bit about our history and how our company was formed. Actually, this month is our 2-year birthday, which is pretty exciting. We started in 2021. I met my co-founder, Dr. Samuel Bannister, at the Sydney Knowledge Hub at Sydney University, where my wife runs that center. And, we really hit it off. I was really interested in starting a company in this space. I saw a number of companies taking natural psychedelics into clinical trials, and I thought this is going to be a really emerging space. And I had a long-standing personal interest in this area. Sam did as well. He actually became a chemist because of his interest in this space. I just want to make it clear that, we are living through what is broadly referred to as a psychedelic renaissance. Going into academia and seeking to explore psychedelic chemistry or pharmacology, even as soon as, as recently as 5 years ago or 10 years ago, it was career suicide, right? There was just no one doing it. And so, when Sam was looking to postdoc at a lab doing psychedelic chemistry, back in the early 2010s, there was basically no places to do it. And so he went into cannabinoid chemistry. And so when him and I met, this was starting to heat up. And so we really sort of bonded on this idea that this was going to be a really exciting emerging space. He had also lost a close friend to suicide earlier that year. And so, we both really believed in what we're trying to achieve with Psylo. And our work began by going through the StartMate Accelerator program, which we were accepted into, and we began our research and development, mostly through sort of contract research organization partners overseas. But later that year, we raised a larger pre-seed round of funding. We brought on our Dr. Will Jorgensen, who's now our lead medicinal chemist, and we established our synthesis labs up the road at UNSW. And I'm continually thankful for Steve and helping to plug us into the UNSW ecosystem and establish that lab. We currently have a team of 6 chemists, and our footprint is growing in that space. So, that wouldn't have been possible without Steve's help. Towards the end of that year. 2022, we ramped up our R&D, kicked off a number of partnerships. We were selected as a top 100 innovator by the Australian, which was pretty cool. We got a lot of governmental backing as well. So beyond the R&D tax credit, which is something that I tell every investor about, and it's a huge differentiation for Australian startups, we received a Kickstarter grant with CSIRO. We received a Therapeutic Innovation Australia voucher, which allowed us to initiate PK studies with Monash University's Center for Drug Candidate Optimization, which has gone really well. And we initiated a partner with NIH in the US as well. They're doing animal studies for us, and that's ongoing. Later in the year, we went through another accelerator program, UNSW Founders Symbio10X program. And that brought Main Sequence Ventures to the table and allowed us to catalyze our seed round of funding late last year. Our team rapidly went from sort of, 3 guys in a co-working space to a lab to, a team of international folks really collaborating on this project. So, I have 15 here towards the end of last year. Next month will be 26, including a number of interns and consultants and advisors, et cetera. So the team's really grown quite quickly. That funding round, we got a number of international venture capital funds, but Main Sequence established the terms of that round, and 10 Mile participated as well, Andrew Forrest's Health Tech Fund. And so, the team has continued to grow. We recently brought on Dr. Larry Winagle, who's a 40-plus year pharma veteran. He's actually developed 5-HT2A antagonists, which are currently drugs on the market as antipsychotics, so he knows this space quite closely. Continued to establish a number of partnerships. And then the last part I've got on this slide is Australia becoming the first country globally to approve psychedelic prescriptions. I just want to caveat that, it's going to take some time for that change to sort of flow down and actually impact patients, but it's definitely helped to put Australia on the map, particularly for our space, and it's created lots of positive tailwinds for us in terms of media attention, fundraising, et cetera. So last slide I'm going to leave you all with is just a bit of sort of where we sit in terms of other companies in this space, because there are quite a few. So as I mentioned, when we first started with Psylo, we saw there were a number of companies that were launching in this classic psychedelic space. So that's taking drugs like LSD or psilocybin or DMT into clinical trials for a range of different indications. After that, we saw a spattering of startups launch in what we think of as sort of reformulated psychedelics. So this is either changing the sort of drug product of classic psychedelics, so a different delivery mechanism or something like that, but also making slight modifications to the chemical structure of first-generation psychedelics in order to claim some chemical novelty. We consider ourselves part of this third generation of psychedelic companies. It's kind of crazy that, the space is so new, and already I'm referring to 3 generations of companies. But I think this is really a helpful way of thinking about it, because, our company and several other companies that are active in this space are really developing entirely new agonists of 5-HT2A with new pharmacology. And, I'm confident that from this effort, we're going to have entirely novel antidepressants that are going to be really helpful to a range of patients. So I'll stop there. Just encourage everyone to follow our journey on psylo.bio is our website, and we're also pretty active on social media, so please follow us there. And then here's the Slido slide again.
Thanks, that was great. Yeah. Matt, do you want to start putting some chairs up? Thanks, everyone. So we're now going to move to, so in terms of questions, if you want to make contact with Josh and do more scientific questions, then please reach out to him later. We want to keep the focus a little bit today on innovation. So now we come to the risky part of the venture, where we ask our 7 panelists to assemble on stage. If you'd like to come to the stage, please.
We fit.
Perfect. Please sit wherever you like. Okay, so I have some pre-formed questions, but please do type in your questions to Slido, or once we've finished the pre-arranged questions, you can just put your hand up, and Matt will bring the microphone to you. So I'm going to take about 10-15 minutes, and then we'll move on to the questions from the floor. So one of the first questions that gets asked a lot is, I'm already overcommitted in clinical practice or / research. What's the motivation for committing additional time to trying to invent new technologies? And I'm going to come to Tim and Phoebe first. So Tim, as a clinical and also a biomedical engineer, what is that something that resonates with you, and what do you think motivates you to get involved in this stuff?
Yes, Steve, I'm busy. Gosh, I think what we can do as clinicians is want to maximize our impact, and if we can, how can we not be involved in innovation to look for the best for our patients for the future? To sit tight and not be outward looking is a mistake. So all of us, we want the best for our families and our the children that we see. So we want that. We have a unique and privileged position as clinicians that, we are at the coalface and we can see what's going on. We can get, we have increased insight into what, is practical and useful. And that's the start. There's a starting point for us. We are time poor, and we we don't want to be losing our connection with clinic by becoming involved in too many other things, but it's a bit of a balance there. That's the trick. So, traditional model of research where you have to have a massive track record, many clinicians can't match that to qualify for NHMRC traditional grants. But, what's exciting about today is that we're going to look at some alternatives and different approaches, clinical translation and, services and accelerators and commercial and industry engagement. So that's really exciting.
Thanks, Tim. Can you pass the microphone to Phoebe? Phoebe is a very senior researcher in cancer, in pancreatic cancer. What's your take on why you want to be involved in innovation?
Thanks, Steve, and great presentation, Josh. Congratulations. Look, I concur with everything that Tim has said, but I would actually argue that partnerships across this multidisciplinary spectrum that we're talking about to make innovation happen. So from clinicians, industry, researchers, government, the full pipeline, you actually gain space because you don't have to be an expert across all of the different parts. So I think that's one of the huge benefits. You get partnerships with the people that can complement your areas of strength. So an example I can give with my own sort of journey is as a pancreatic cancer researcher, I engaged really early on in my career with clinicians, and they have really helped me inform what's the right question to ask at the bench. And so that's not a waste of time investing in that end. And on the other side of it, I haven't been able to commercialise anything personally yet, but certainly my expanding role and engagement with industry has really helped us, I guess, rationalise what are the important questions, have really quick pivot areas of response. As academics, sometimes we get caught up and stuck in something that we just have an interest about, but is it really going to help the patients is the question. And so being able to bounce ideas off business-minded people actually saves us a lot of time at the research front, and I believe that feedback I then give at the clinical end actually gains us a lot of time and perspective, and so you can actually be really rational in your design and approach to your area of research. The other key benefit, of course, obviously we want to help the patients. That's the top thing and why we can be involved in innovation. But I think you've got the economic benefits that we heard a little bit about in Josh's presentation. And that is this opens the door in a currently tough climate for funding where government is driving towards increasing investment in the sort of commercial end rather than the basic end. But if you can get across that spectrum, you'll diversify your funding niche and potentially open up areas to support long-term people in your team. And that's certainly happened with me. We've got substantial contracts with big industry that actually help fund some key elements and staff within our team. So you're building that team and the size, and they're giving you feedback on everything that you do in terms of the models scientifically and how beneficial are they to the business end. And I guess the third thing, again, I just want to finish because my umbrella is partnerships. You cannot underestimate the power of partnerships across this spectrum. I think you grow as an individual, and that's really important. More than anything, you're actually able to learn and continue to grow. Thanks.
Thanks, Phoebe. Great question, great answer. If you can pass the microphone to Eric. Eric, I have a question for you. So, Eric, you're the Senior Business Development Manager in Knowledge Exchange. This is a question that you must come across quite a bit as well. So, a common question, what share will I get in any financial returns? It's my invention. Why doesn't it belong to me?
Thanks, Steve. I can comment on the from USW perspective. According to USW IP policy, any IP created by USW employee within the employment capacity belongs to USW. However, the university recognizes the inventorship, so the inventors will get 1/3 of any net commercialization income from this IP. I guess that's general sort of IP policy. As sort of the institution owns the IP, so I guess one of the good things is the university will pay any patent costs. On top of that, the university has a whole team of experts from Knowledge Exchange who will help the inventors sourcing the funding to support the further development work. So I guess this could be from the government funding schemes, or it could from the external partners, for example, industry or investors. So the inventors can immediately benefit from getting more funding to support their further research work. I guess also a point trying to make here, it's that, knowledge exchange, as a tech transfer office, we offer a small pot of fundings as well called a commercialization seed fund. So this is available for the UNSW inventors. So the idea is to sort of really trying to bridge the gap between the early stage IP and the more investable technology. Also want to quickly comment on the commercialization pathways. So there are two major pathways that we follow at the universities. One is the license model. Basically, we license the IP to industry or external partners, and we sort of, in return, we get the license fee or the royalties. And according to that IP policy I mentioned previously, 1/3 will goes to the inventors. And the another model is called a startup model. Recently, UNSW has updated the startup work frame. So basically trying to promote this model within our research community. So particularly for the inventors who are really passionate about the technology and want really to take by themselves, and this framework really sort of support them and allocate resources to help them to do so. So obviously, as the inventor, and most likely the founders of this startup company, they will benefit from the company share ownership. It's quite different arrangement compared to that 1/3 policy. So this is quick comment to Steve's question, and happy to elaborate more at the Q&A session. Thank you.
Eric. That's great. And just from a LHD perspective, or any institution, that 1/3 ownership is pretty common practice throughout most institutions. But as Eric says, it's very much about the institution will support you at the early stages, and if you are so motivated, you could spin out and benefit directly from share ownership rather than through the 1/3 IP ownership. Great. Thanks, Eric. If you can pass the microphone in that direction. I'm going to have some questions now for Ian, Dina, and Josh. We'll start with Ian, please. So here's a big one. How am I going to fund this work at different stages of development? So Ian, you're working very much at the early stages with Institute of Health Engineering. What's your take on funding?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Steve, and thanks, everyone. At the Tyree Institute of Health Engineering, we are very much focused on lowering barriers for clinicians to make connections and collaborations with the expertise at UNSW, both UNSW scientific and technology expertise, but as well as the capabilities. And that's really to innovate around clinician unmet needs. How do we make these connections and start taking projects forward at an early stage? Really trying to address the barriers, one of which is funding, and really creating these partnerships as part of teams. So the Institute does have small amounts of seed funding to take promising projects or high potential projects forward. But beyond that sort of cash funding, there's a lot of resourcing to also enable connection to expertise and expertise ourselves that engineers can give around early stage prototyping, around software development, some of the key steps that you really need at an early stage to prove the concept. We offer resourcing and support there to take that idea forward, to allow you to work with the technology expertise, prove the concept, and secure larger pots of funding along this pathway towards translation.
Thanks, Ian. If you can pass the microphone to Dina. Dina, if I can come to you as someone from UNSW Founders, the Health 10X program. What's your take on, obviously you're very engaged in the startup process. How do you get funded as a startup?
So really just building on the comments that Phoebe and Jan already made, the importance of really understanding the unmet clinical need and co-designing the problem. The first thing we're trying to emphasize at UNSW founders, it's a very bad scenario when there is a solution that is looking for a problem to be solved, and that usually never end up being funded and never end up being commercialized. Instead, both public grant funding and venture capitalist firm, they're looking for a sequence of steps to be taken by innovators to reach the market and have an impact, starting from addressing the right big problem, co-designing the solution with the users who have expertise before progressing. From maybe researchers, clinicians point of view, it's really important to understand how private funding works. You would be all very well familiar with the public grants and how to apply and structure your application for those. Then there is sometimes a bit of misconception that if I've got the technology, everyone just needs to invest in my startup because my technology is peer-reviewed, IP patented, and it works. It's almost build it and they will come mentality that unfortunately in reality does not work. So instead, before trying to seek private funding, it's really the best way is to engage and receive free advice that is available through UNSW founders, different courses, educational opportunities to understand what is exactly the value of your technology you're building, how to package it up in a way that there is a business case for this to be scaled. And in this case, investors will come when they see money, because unfortunately the private capital, they want to see financial returns. And I would just want to preface it just to say that very often this financial return is seen as something evil. We always argue that if you really want for your technology to be impactful, it has to be scaled, which is two things working together, providing for scale of financial returns and bigger impact. And of course, we always look and give example of ResMed and Cochlear, who reached hundreds of millions of patients and improved lives of so many by being successful commercial ventures. So that's just a bit generic, and I'll let Josh maybe give some very tailored startup advice here too.
Can you guys hear me? Okay. I'll just echo that and just sort of articulate in a different way. Raising money privately is all about storytelling. And so, yes, you need to have, the solution you're trying to solve really highlighted, but it's all about the story of, how is that impactful? Basically, the why do I care sort of question. Like, I always encourage other founders that I talk to just like put yourself on the other side of the table. And, research is exciting and science is exciting, but it's all about distilling it down into a narrative that people can actually grasp and understand and get to the other side on. So yeah, I think everything that you said is right. And a lot of that, being able to articulate the impact that you're going to have is basically crafting a story that is compelling.
Thanks, Josh. I've heard David Burt say on a few occasions, if you assume everybody that you're talking to doesn't care, then you're probably not going to be that far off the mark. Parissa, just my final pre-prepared question was for you. One that comes across a lot as well. I don't know what the current state of the art is for technology development or what the market need is for a new device. I'm not a biomedical engineer. Where am I going to find all this expertise?
After listening to everybody talk, I think there is a real clear theme here that we seem to be very reactive rather than proactive when it comes to addressing real unmet needs in our health care, whether it be, your device that you're trying to implement or you're trying to create connection after the fact. I think the biggest gap for all of us is that we don't understand the needs really well. right? Because somebody is going to have to, at the end of the day, pay for your technology. And if it's not addressing a real need in the health system, it's going to look amazing, but it's not going to go anywhere. So it's not going to have the impact that the researchers want. So really starting proactively from where the needs are and what solutions they might already be available and why aren't they implemented, and then finding solutions to implement what already might exist, but it's been really difficult to implement. It's going to be really important. And I guess, as you know, engineers, their job is to come up with solutions, and there is no shortage of ideas when it comes to engineering. I'm married to an engineer, and he tries to solve my problems every day, and I say, stop. You don't understand my problem. So I think the best thing engineers can do, and I think Tyree iHealthy tries to do that, is trying to bring people who really deeply understand the unmet need at the clinical level to those people to come up with solutions. And it is a team sport, as you said. We need to address problems together. But at the same time, I guess our researchers and clinician research has been very reluctant when it comes to innovation that is going to have to become commercial to have that impact, because they think, well, I want it to be freely available to everybody. Well, that's very noble, but somebody is going to have to pay for it, and there is no return on the investment for that someone or that group. Even if it's a government, is going to have to replace it from another bucket to pay for this. Then it's not going to go anywhere. So just going back to addressing the need, having the right partnership, and I guess for our researchers to understand how to tell the story of what it is they're working on, and that we haven't been good at that. I've been working with the George Institute for 15 years now, previously with other kind of medical research institutes and universities. And our researchers are fantastic at getting the government funding, but then when it comes to telling that story to somebody who doesn't understand science, they're not good at it. So articulating that impact, who's not a scientist, who's going to have to fund you because they're in a position to fund it, it hasn't been good. So articulating impact is something we are missing. And that change of culture is something that has been very, very slow. I know that MRFF is really pushing for future research to really be impactful and to create jobs and, to have an impact and translate. But our research, I guess, ecosystem is not moving that fast.
Terrific. Thanks, Marissa. There's a great bunch of questions on Slido. I'm going to ask one, but please, if anyone does have a question in the room, please raise your hand. Matt, would you mind just grabbing one of the microphones and just make sure that anyone can ask a question? But I'm going to ask this one. I think your point about unmet needs, which has really resonated as a theme, it relates to this first question, which is, at what point do community and consumer groups get invited to these conversations? This panel's focusing on innovation without potentially including lived experience. Now, I think that's a very good comment. I suppose to a large extent we rely very much on clinicians to be the front line, I guess, in engaging with communities. So, Tim, I'm going to drop you in and ask that question. So, at what point do community and consumer groups get invited to the conversation?
Look, I can't speak for anybody else, but I think community and consumer groups should need to be at the front as well with the people with lived experience. I think they've got as the clinicians, they have privileged access to and knowledge, in their particular areas about what the problems are and what the issues are, and practical real-world solutions, which is the starting point, isn't it, for all of us? Sure.
Yeah. Josh, any thoughts on that? Yeah, please do.
Sorry, I'll just jump in. I've done a lot of work with the Cancer Council in training consumers, and I hate the term consumers. They're patients, they're family members that are going through whatever they're going through, and they should be, as you say, front and centre. And often I communicate with basic scientists, and they're coming in way too late. It's never too early. If you can't pitch your concept as to why it's going to solve their problem that they're going through at point one, then it's not going to fly anywhere. So I think consumer engagement early in any scientific project is really important. We've got a team of 5 consumers that we work with, and they've actually helped us get from the science lab to the clinic. Without their push and drive, we wouldn't be in the clinical trial space.
Thanks, Phoebe. Next question on Slido is, how do you get the partnerships of universities and hospitals? Who do you contact? I love this question because as someone who is trying to bring together the precinct as a whole, that's a question that runs through my mind all the time, but I think I might direct it at Ian if that's okay, because that's something you've been working strongly on too from the iHealthy point of view.
Absolutely, and thank you for the question. It is, it is a big challenge, just given the number of people in the space. But what we are really trying to do as an ecosystem and building together is very strong alignment along which part of the journey you're on and who's best to support in that role. And the first step is really amongst this group having built an understanding of what each one of us does and where we are best placed to contribute. But I would say, we want to reach a stage where anyone, a sort of a question or a query directed at any one of us will allow you to get to the right person. At the Tyree iHealthy, we're very much focused on, what is the first engagement with sort of technology expertise. And, as a clinician, you have so many questions on your mind. What is the current state of technology? Who's available out there? Who's the best expert for me to reach out with? And so we sort of have consultations open to anyone to kind of drop us a line, and we have that initial consultation, and then we figure out who's the best next step and try and facilitate that conversation to actually go ahead.
Thanks, Ian. I think the other thing I would say is that all of us work together. We all see each other regularly. This is a community. There is no wrong door for contact. The last part of that question was about who do you contact. Contact any one of us, and we'll cross-refer. There's absolutely no issue with that.
Can I make a comment about that? I guess,
please do, Chris.
We always go to the same people because we've got like really good relationship, and I just keep thinking about couple of researchers at the George that we keep going to, and they're like, why do you keep coming to me? I'm already collaborating. So we've got to find a way to support our clinicians. So they're not, they're doing already 1.5 FTE in the hospital, and then we want them to get engaged in innovation. We have to have a way of actually supporting them as well if we really want to get that connection between innovators and clinicians.
Terrific. Great point, Marissa. Oh, question at the back there.
Yeah, thanks everybody. I had a question for Josh. Listening to your story of the construction of Psylo, it struck me that you must have started with a very strong idea that gave you sort of some momentum. And then it sounds like you've kind of constructed the company where there's certain expertise that you're managing in-house, and then there's sort of a mosaic of partnerships, maybe CRO, maybe academic, that are allowing you to build, I guess, beyond your expertise or in areas where you don't have local momentum or whatever. I was really curious how you strategically decided what was going to be in-house, CRO, academic, and how you build that up, because it's very intimidating to think about a startup where you go, well, we got to do everything, which is, you can't really start if you think that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, really good question. On your first point around clarity of what we were looking to build, I would just point out that, the business changes every 7.5 minutes. Initially we actually had what is our current program alongside an entirely different program that we ended up dropping based on a number of different reasons. So, startups never look the same one minute to the next. It's all about adapting and, but that being said, in terms of what we are doing, yes, we did have a clear vision of what we were trying to achieve there. And the one thing I've learned in this space, I'm not a scientist, I'm not a native sort of biotech entrepreneur. I've done other startups before. And the main lesson for me early on in building Psylo was the realization that no two biotech companies are the same. And so it really is making these strategic calls around what are the core capabilities that we want to build in-house versus what are the capabilities that we'd be happy to partner on. And it's sort of just like, get the results in, store it in your data room and move on. And so for us, core capabilities that we've determined are 1, medicinal chemistry, and 2, neurobiology. So my co-founder, Sam, moved to the US last week to join Larry, who I had on that timeline slide, and we're establishing a neurobiology lab in the US to propel that part of the program. And it's basically, we determined that those are the 2 areas where there's sort of like the most value add in having an internal team that is, building muscle in terms of being able to sort of interpret the learnings and replicate it. And, it's part of the platform itself, as opposed to, okay, anyone can run a receptor cellular assay and you get the data back and, you can do it here. It sort of doesn't matter as long as you can trust the data. So, earlier on, I was speaking with CROs who were like, 2 dudes in a molecule will help you get to the clinic, right? Like, you could be in a garage with your dog and launch a virtual startup. And then, on the flip side of that, there are other companies where every single part of it is done in-house. And, we knew that that was not capital efficient and realistic. And, we also knew that just like, setting up in a WeWork and trying to build a company that way was not what we were seeking to do. So, we sort of narrowed in on those areas, which were the muscles we wanted to develop.
Can I just make a quick comment? So just maybe a bit generalizing with how we work with startups using so-called lean startup approach, which basically says that at each point of time, you have a set of assumptions that over the next period you need to test. So we never expect startups, as Josh mentioned, to be looking the same in 6 months' time, and they came to us because the key question was, what are the critical assumptions that we're making today? And over next period, let's say 2 weeks or months or 2 months, what are you going to do to test those? And if at the end you need to change the way you operate, yes, you're just changing. So some of the venture capitalists and other kind of key opinion leaders in innovation space says that project plans or business plans, that's not what exists in this fast moving pace, but the agile approach of constantly adapting and learning and running those experiments, that's how the innovation and work operates.
Thanks, Dina. I think it's going to get back.
Right. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Pedro, and first of all, thank you, Josh, for your presentation, and to all of you in the panel. I'm interested particularly in the transfer of technology to startups. So you mentioned 2 models. One is using a license, which what I've heard from venture capitalists, they sometimes have mandates not to invest in companies that have licenses. So I'm more interested in understanding what is particularly the university looking in the founding team, to transfer the pattern to the startup.
Who was that directed at? Anyone in particular, or was it?
Eric, you can start and then I can.
Okay.
So just building on what Eric was saying with them, at UNSW, it's a bit special case because we've been one of the first universities who actually launched staff spin-out framework. So not each university accepted that, and we're quite unique and well-positioned in this way because there is a clear stipulated process of how an inventor, a researcher, clinician can spin out technology into a company, and there are predefined steps of things you need to do. So university role in this case, and we sit on staff spin-out committee, it's not to say no and prevent researcher, but to empower researcher to spin out at the right time. And timing is very critical. So you need to almost think that you should have been incubating within the university up to the right time and leave university to commercialize when the time happens. So just for the last part of your question, it's really encouraging to think what should be done in-house as research. And then when there are promising market signs, you've got collaborators, you've got investors, you've got customers, that's the right time to spin it out, because once you spun out, you're on your own. And first part of your question, how investors look at licensing and why they don't like, that can be for two reasons. First, if this license is just the terms of spinning out. So if in some of the license, it's maybe not perpetual, it's just given for a limited period of time, investor who comes and sees that researcher clinician startup has just a time limited license to operate, it's a huge risk. Of course, they will say no. They need to have a clear understanding how this license will be converted into IP that is owned by the company. What are the so-called trigger events that this license will be transferred? Because you really need to understand, like VC perspective, venture capital investor perspective. If they come and they invest, they don't want to invest in a company that will know, right, operate at some point of time. So like, if this answers your question.
Thanks, Dina. I think there's another question over there, Brooke, please, if you wouldn't mind. Oh, okay. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. And my question is a bit basic. Sorry if everyone knows about it. But my understanding is that getting access to for blood samples for clinical trials and passing regulations are the really big step, and it's quite challenging and postpones revenue. And another thing I heard is that for medical diagnostic devices, it's a bit difficult to understand what is the way that they're going to be paid at the end. So these two are really big challenges as a person who wants to start a company. Do you think partnerships can help in this regard to reduce the challenges, or we have to go through anyway?
Thanks, Phoebe.
Absolutely. If I understood the first part, it's the difficulty in obtaining blood samples and the like, if you're wanting to evaluate certain questions. So it is hard. What I found in my own team experience, I had all the clinicians, all the surgeons, everything was lined up. But unless my team are willing to be there at the time the sample gets collected, help fill out the paperwork, provide the support for the clinical team, it's less likely to happen. So we've set up resources within our team to support the clinical team, and I think that makes for a great partnership, because all they have to do then is consent the patient, which is what they do all of the time. They have their normal consultation. Tim can probably add to this, but you're there with your team, with the ESCI, with everything ready to go, and I think you do need to provide your end of the resources to support that. And in terms of just partnerships in general, I think you've got to find partners that have an interest in what you do. I think if you're trying to get a clinician engaged and they're not passionate about what you're trying to study, that makes all the difference. So again, setting up your pitch to go and meet with new clinicians or a team of nurses that will support you, you need to be clear, what are they going to get out of it? Make sure you demonstrate how you value their contribution of time and effort and the patients. And if you don't get that sort of warm and fuzzy, oh yes, I really want to help you, it's not going to work. So you really have to get the right team, and that's where reaching out to people like us to point you in the right direction, but have your pitch ready.
Thanks, Phoebe. One more question at the back.
Yeah, hi. So my name is Desiree, and I'm here with my co-founder, Rani, from Ace Girl. And so my question follows on the IP and sharing this IP with the university. So we've identified a very special specialist from another university in New South Wales that we may engage down the road. We haven't decided yet, but I think one of the challenges that we are thinking could be a challenge is the sharing of IP with the university and us as a startup. And really, I just would like to understand how to navigate that, as I understand like different universities have different IP policies as to how they work with startups.
Thanks for your question. I think we'll start with Eric.
Yeah, thanks for your question. I guess if my understanding is right, is sort of this IP currently held in the startup company, and they want to work with the university for some further development work, etc. So in that sort of regard, obviously we kind of recognize the IP owned by the startup company, and for any further work, whether it's through contract research work or sort of jointly apply some IP. Applying some sort of fundings from the government or from another sources, I guess we can sort of talk sort of individually in terms of the IP arrangements. Could be sort of we okay for you own any sort of project IP, or we sort of jointly own the project IP. Created from the from collaborative projects. So it's really sort of case by case discussion, but. Happy for you to reach out to a knowledge exchange or tech transfer office in general, like in the university, and they will sort of be able to, discuss and learn more sort of about the scenario and sort of give comments on that.
Perfect. Thanks very much. We're at time. Obviously, a lot of questions on Slido we didn't get to, but my appeal to you really is to reach out. What I've been interested in to see is a lot of the questions are actually quite technical that we're getting now. So, that is a very good reason to get in touch and ask those questions in person. As I say, there's no wrong door. Please contact any of us and they'll direct the question in the right direction. Thank you very much for this Mind the Gap session today. My parting appeal for everyone is to consider how you could contribute and reach out for a conversation. Thank you to our wonderful panelists, and a special thank you to Josh. You all stay here and we'll take a couple of photos. Okay, all done. Thank you.